Hi, this is Stephen Cobb with a very special edition of Florida Criminal Law where we're talking about crime and treatment. Now, where we left off was a discussion of the problems with Florida's different treatment programs, whether they are special conditions of probation or a more formal program like the Keaton facility where people often get sent for drug and alcohol problems. If you want to really understand why Florida has a real problem with rehabilitation and spends a large amount of money of your tax dollars basically lighting them on fire, it's a combination of a false belief system that is not scientific and lack of funding. Now, let's dispense with these in reverse order because lack of funding is very basic and very short. They just don't appropriate the money needed. But amazingly, we have enough money to make just about everything illegal in Florida. Minor in possession of alcohol could be a $50 ticket instead of a criminal charge, but of course we don't do that. Marijuana is criminalized to the point of ridiculousness where the actual statute, 893.13, specifically states that marijuana is so dangerous it cannot even be used or experimented on safely. We know that's a lie. And so we have these types of things all through our system, and now we're moving over into beliefs. The problem with things like drug court and much of what we have as rehabilitative treatment in the Florida criminal justice system can best be described as faith healing. And yes, I'm going to give 12-step a very, very hard time for one basic reason. 7 of the 12 steps are faith-based. And that in and of itself isn't a problem if they are scientifically valid and actually work. But then we run into the second problem. They are not scientifically valid and they don't work. Instead, we tell people one of the steps. It works if you work it. And then when it reasonably, foreseeably does not work, what do? We blame the patient. Gave them the wrong treatment, blame the patient. Now, how do I know that it doesn't work? Well, just do a few Google searches. Google Scholar is outstanding. Look at the hardcore data and ask hard questions because, as Tony Robbins says, questions are the answer. And questions such as, what is the 5-year effectiveness rate of 12-step? When you start Googling those types of questions, you're going to run into different types of responses, but one is going to be, oh, well, it works and our program is wonderful. And you're going to run into the other section that says, no, it works about 3 to 5% of the time. Now think about it. If a medication worked 3 to 5% of the time, in other words, it had a 95% plus failure rate, do you think the FDA would allow it on the market? I would suggest not. Yet because of our culture, because the 12-step mythology, the faith-based aspect fits into our Southern culture so well, we end up having a situation where people are ordered into different forms of 12-step, even if by not that name, in drug court and other types of rehabilitative treatment in Florida. The reason this is problematic from a scientific standpoint goes back to that child falling off the roof of a car. You need to take a diagnostic imaging. Specifically, and I want you to think about this, doesn't it amaze you that someone can go to a doctor, a psychiatrist trained in treating the brain, talk to that psychiatrist for 45 minutes answering questions, and at the end of that time, without a single nuclear imaging of the brain being performed, that person will walk out with chemical surgery in their hand in the form of a prescription? What's wrong with that picture besides, well, everything? In no other area of medicine do we do this. Why do we do this? Obviously because insurance companies don't want to pay. So within the criminal justice system, we actually use this failure path that the criminal justice system embarks upon, and we reverse it, flip the script, and we use it to help you or someone you love. And I'll cover that in more detail in the next part of this exciting series, Crime and Treatment, as part of Florida Criminal Law TV.